going.
Oh, great. Welcome to News from the Real World podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Julian.
I'm Rebecca.
Annie.
We're going to start off today talking about the video that is about the props master who deals with paper props primarily for movies, which was really interesting because just seeing the amount of detail and research that goes into these props before they even get to the movie set for the actors to have hands-on, and just the thoroughness of it in general, as well as the passion for his work, was really interesting to just see from a professional standpoint, and the variety of tools he needed to use to get to some of these products.
Yeah, I mean, my experience with paper props before I read this was using Photoshop and then printing something out, and that was kind of all it was and what it needed to be, especially kind of for theater, because you have that barrier between the audience. But with something where cameras will pick up even flipping pages, that you kind of need that detail, and he does a really good job of it.
Yeah, and the fact that for when he's making a book or something, he goes through and does all this research in order to create the text that the book would be, even if it's just ruffled through once and that's it.
And I loved how he kind of made a story for the book, not only what was in the text, but also where the book was before this, how the book got to the condition it's in now, and kind of created that aspect that the viewers might not even think about.
Yeah, the whole just you don't put some brown paint on them now it's age. No. It's what was it, water damage? Where was it water damage? How long ago? What having all of having the full story of the object and then creating the object to sort of tell a little story in itself.
Yes,
that's part of it,
which is very cool. Also, some of the time he spent on these things, I think it was the Book of Secrets or whatever. Yeah. Oh my god! I know he was doing other things too. He wasn't I'm spending months and months just on the Book of Secrets, but still, just to think about all the research he would need to do that. And the fact that he kind of does that more in-depth research and wasn't here are the first 10 conspiracy theories in America and I'm gonna just put them all in this book. He really thought about it.
Although that kind of couldn't help but make me wonder, just from the perspective of a movie producer, I get that movie budgets are really, really big, but also this guy's time can't be cheap. He's really skilled.
Oh, yeah.
Doing this really specific thing really well.
I mean, material costs too on top of that.
I'm just thinking labor costs. Do I want to pay someone for 4 months of time to write the text on a bunch of pages that will never be on screen? That part seemed weird to me.
I think that book, even for its limited screen time, was so focal to the point of the story.
That's going in a museum kind of thing.
That's
maybe not the book on the shelf over there or something like that, but I think in that instance it was probably worth it because that is the story.
Also, as they say in the video, they God, my thoughts just left my head. As they say in the video, people are basing this for the context. They're looking at the book and even all the pages, and that's how they're figuring out what else is happening in the movie. So it's not just about that one page. It is about setting the stage.
And also, I think another thing, with that book, especially in the age of Netflix and whatnot, even if it's on the screen for a split second, someone is gonna freeze that panel and read through everything there.
I mean, even before Netflix, I was a nosy kid. With my DVD player, I would pause on random things to see what it was. So it's that, but I don't.
But I think even more so now. It's even easier now to do.
But I think that's a good. That just happens to be a good fallout from what they're doing, because I don't think that that's necessarily the motivating factor. I think it is more the care and everything in building this world that a little more artistic-y side is the real, this is what we need to do for this to happen.
And also when it's on a giant movie screen for National Treasure Book of Secrets, that's a very big screen with a lot of detail. So you kind of need that level of precision as compared to from theater, which is 12 feet away, or when you're watching something on your computer, which is a lot smaller.
Yeah, for sure.
I've worked with people who like were used to doing like props for theater, and then they did a prop for a movie once, and they were just like, oh, and like they made like they're very good at their job, so they made it like very well, but they were like, oh, you know, it doesn't matter because they're used to theater and like audiences far away, and then they saw the movie and like one of the shots was just like screened in on the prop, and they were like, oh man, movie's a little different. Like, you like and like with the editing shots and stuff, like you don't really get to control how much of your work is seen with a prop, because if they decide, oh, we really like this like fifth conspiracy like theory you put into the page, they might open it up to that one in a different scene and start working. So I think having that like drive, because I don't ever think everyone has that like I really want to do it this thoroughly, and I think that's what really shows like the passion of his work and what this is what he like should be doing. So
or things like having a file folder where every single paper in that file folder is fully filled out as being makes sense in the file folder, like even if probably the plan is to only pull this one piece of paper out and you never see the rest of it, if in theory then while they're shooting like they want to have someone drop it or spill it or whatever, if it's just a bunch of blank pages other than the one, you can't do that.
Or even just like the same page over and over again, like you'll notice that.
And in theater, like the prop master may be like sitting in the house for tech, and so it can be kind of part of that conversation, whereas in movies like they send it out, and so there isn't like the kind of instant feedback that we sometimes have in theater.
Great.
All right. So our next article is about the idea of non-consensual audience participation, specifically in the context of a dance piece where dancers were like going in the audience and like climbing on top of people and sort of it not really being okay to just jump onto an unsuspecting audience member, which I completely agree with. I think you should ask permission to see if people want to audience participate.
I mean, I think, like, I'm just so surprised that this dance group didn't just, like, have that as part of, like, when you buy the ticket, here's something you should know. Because, like, clearly it sounded like almost every single person in the audience was touched by an actor or climbed over at some point. So it was, like, the easiest way to get permission would be at the front door when you walk in, you are notified of this.
But then it becomes a barrier. Then it's like, well, if I don't feel comfortable with this happening, then I can't see the piece. And I don't know if it should be that. Maybe it could be like SeaWorld, where there's like a splash zone, or like if you sit in these kind of seats, then you're automatically agreeing and consenting to it. But
I've actually had a show where we had a splash. It was a in the round production of Macbeth.
Oh, okay,
And
like a blood splash zone.
Yeah, because of blood splash, and also because the set was just an octagon filled with dirt, and so during fights, like dirt would get thrown up, and so the first like 3 rows, we joked about giving them ponchos, but we didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Like this is like one specific instance, but I do think in general there is also a lack of like asking permissions from audience for what they're doing. And in my decoding media class, because I'm a media designer now, we were talking about this and how like someone thought of for one of their designs, they would have like signs that said like applause, laughter, cheer, and like that kind of stuff. And like that's asking audience to participate, but it's not. It's something that you as an audience member can choose not to do, and you're not like there's no consequence for not doing it as yourself. So, like, there's such a scale of what audience participation is, and how do you, like, I don't think it's easy to put a rule down about it.
I think this company in particular was being reckless about a lot of things, because they even cited that, like, they were climbing on things and glass was breaking on audience members. It seemed like they had people on stage touching themselves, and then they climbed out into the audience, and I'm like, nope, that's when I would I'm a very polite theater audience member, and I do not like it could be like the worst show I've ever seen, and I'm not getting up, but if someone tries to touch me, I would be out.
Also,
especially because they like mostly make it like it's just like it's just a very
it's everything that you just like why wasn't this explained?
And they also like picked audience members up and
Yeah.
carried them around
Yeah,
their
like,
heads.
that's
I would
crazy.
be freaking out.
Yeah.
Like there's a difference between like someone like running through your aisle as part of a chase scene and like a sea of mostly naked people like climbing on you and then like picking you up and carrying you. Like,
Yeah.
Like, I agree with Andy. This thing definitely should have had really hardcore, like, if you don't like being touched, if you don't this, and like either have it be, maybe like this is a piece that only makes sense if you're comfortable with all this nonsense, or they could have a seating area where like this is the safe area, they won't go here, this is the area where they're gonna go, so you can still see it.
And I think like trying to go in the mind of like a director or someone or performer even, I think the reason why they would want to not do that is because they want that element of surprise.
That happens a lot with trigger warnings too. Like, don't put a trigger warning because that's going to be a spoiler, but you still have to do it.
I think it's one of those things where it's like if it becomes more common that like these types of warnings are in that fine print on your ticket or like posted on that sign at the door, then people who like want to go to the theater and be surprised by everything can like choose not to look at it. Because it'll be something more common that you're, like, familiar with. Oh, like, okay, I can see that there's a list of things that's going to happen. I'm going to choose to read that or choose not to. And at that point, it's, like, in your hands.
Yeah, I think if there were a really standard way where, like, this is exactly where to look to find that information, then it would work to make it be something that could be, like, you don't look at it if you don't want to look at it, you look at it if you want to look at it. I think the hard thing is that because that place for standardized information doesn't exist right now, you I feel like it kind of has to be in a super overt place until everyone standardizes, okay, here's a more subtle place where it can go and everyone will know where to find it.
I don't know about everyone, but when I watch a show, even like if I know like there's gonna be strobe or there's gonna be haze, and those are like the small examples that we put warnings for, but I don't like wait for that moment. Like I don't wait for the strobe light in the show. I don't wait for the haze to start. I just kind of let it happen. I'm not like sitting around like, when is the haze? And I think that's true for some of the more like for other like trigger warnings too.
Yeah. With that being said, I do know people who you're like, oh, there's audience participation in this show. Even if it's not, then like some people get like anxious about that and they'll sit and they'll be like, I don't want to participate. I don't want to participate, but they kind of like think about that. So I understand the instinct to be like, we want to surprise people, but that is but like, is this really fueling your art in a way that is making the show better to kind of throw this on people? And this is not, I will say, this is not, this is reckless.
This is such an extreme.
This is an extreme.
But like, are you like fueling your art in a way that is like making it better? And I don't care if you don't get to surprise people, consent is more important. And even if like in the article they were like, I've like had actors sit on my lap, but first they go, hey, can I sit on your lap?
Yeah.
And if you go, no, then they go to the next person and they go, hey, can I sit on your lap? Like
I've seen those kind of shows.
Yeah. I think the way we did it for Alcestis, for those of you who participated in or saw Alcestis, was really good because the way we did it was, as you walked in at the beginning, there were audience roles that were talking only, and there were audience roles that were like interacting with actors only, and you could sign your name up on one of two different colors of slips of paper, and then they drew names before the start of the show of who was going to be the audience participants, and then for the people who were going to be interacting with the actors, like they walked through like, okay, like I'm going to do this, like can I put my hands like on your face? And then if they said no, they would just like be like, okay, what about shoulders, and like figure out what worked for them.
Yeah. And we had a lot of conversations before we like got to that point in the rehearsal room of like, well, what is the like alternative? If they say no, you can't put your hands on my face, what do you do then? You say, can I put my hands on your shoulders? And like there were we talked kind of through what happens if the person said no. Yeah. And so we were prepared for that.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, or there's like a couple seats in the front row that had like a thing. And they just like would check in with that person, see if they're okay with it.
I apologize for any racket. There's a cat under the table making noise.
So our next article is How to Take the Hell Out of Hell Week. And it goes through how you don't need to have Hell Week be torture, especially for production members. And it goes through how different theaters did kind of different things to make their employees' lives better for the week. Some places made it so that employees had like an off day, so like the rest of the group would be on, but they would alternate who was off. Some places spread it out over more kind of linear days, but had less hours per day, and so it totaled the same number of working hours. And it also discusses how this is not a one-size-fits-all issue. Like, each theater needs to figure out what works best for them and kind of implement that for their employees.
Yeah, this article, like, kind of brought me back to, like, that high school mindset where it was, like, kind of that cool thing to be like, oh, I'm in Hell Week, because, like, even someone out of theater could understand that you're under a lot of stress, and, like, obviously something big's happening, but it was, like, I mean, once you kind of become more of an adult, get into the professional world, it's just, like, it's part of your job, and I think that there's a way to, I mean, I love tech. I think it's one of the greatest parts of putting on a show. I think it's really interesting. So it's like, don't put this label on it and try to make it into this thing that it's not.
Yeah, I haven't heard it called Hell Week since I left high school.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize people
Yeah,
called it that.
Yeah.
I just always call it Tech Week ever since I left.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's a problem that people call that. I just haven't heard it called that for years.
Well, I just think calling it Hell Week, you're kind of setting yourself up for,
Yeah.
like, this is gonna be a terrible week. Like, not all techs are hell.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they're long hours,
Mhm.
but, like, it doesn't make it hell. And also, as most of us, I imagine, intend to go into, like, theater as a profession and will likely be spending a lot of time in tech weeks, I'd like to not have the mentality where I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you know, like, 20 weeks out of the year, I'll be in Hell Week. Like,
Yeah.
no thanks.
That's like half the year.
That's a
Yeah.
lot of weird. You're doing 20 productions a year?
It depends on where you, well, as a TD, you can be working on
Okay, that's
multiple
fair.
things on the
That's
time.
fair.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
But, like,
Anyway.
just, like, as an example, it'll be a substantial amount of your time, and so having that mindset of already calling it Hell Week.
It makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're predicting it, so it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Not to say that some tech weeks won't be miserable. For, like, I think, like,
But some build weeks will be miserable, or
Oh,
some
yeah.
rehearsal weeks will be miserable. Like.
and there's some things that you, like, cannot do. Like, you can do if you do your job very well and you're, like, preemptive about some of the problems you might face, then you can, I think, relieve a lot of that pressure a lot of the times. But sometimes you can't predict what, like, if a producer comes in and is like,
Change it all.
no, change it all, and then you're like, well, better go
Okay.
get my power tools, like,
Yeah.
or,
Let's
like,
reblock the show.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
you can't really help that.
Yeah.
I do think that separately, though, like, there is an issue with work-life balance in the theater industry.
Right.
And, like, I like that aside, I do think the article is super valid in the sense that it is worth thinking about, okay, this is a window of time when people are working really long hours. Do we really need all of those people to be working all of those hours?
Mhm.
Does every single person who's sitting in that tech really need to be there for that whole time? Or is it going to be fun if they go home and someone tells them the notes? And I think in general, thinking about, am I having these people work just because, like, it's easier to not think about who needs to work, and I don't want to worry about, like, oh, but what if they need to be there? And think through, like, can they go home? Because I do think that's helpful.
There's also a lot of hurry up and wait in theater. So, like, if they're just gonna wait there the entire time, do they have to be there?
Yeah, could they be on call or something, or, like, I don't know. It depends on, like, the living situation, but if you're like, well, I could be there in 20 minutes, but are you, like, making me stay in the theater, like, if something really goes wrong? I don't know. It's just the work-life balance thing. I think people get, like, people are really, really invested in theater because it is a great career, but I think they like, don't separate it as a career. They're like, I love my career, and
That,
let
like,
it
it's
take
like-
over their life. And
Yeah.
I'm like, no, like, go home, you know? Like, I yelled at Chase the other day. I was like, go. He was like, should I stay? It was like 11 o'clock at night, and he was like, should I stay and work on, like, these like things for a few more minutes, and I was like, go home.
Yeah.
We work 4 hours every night on these things, and you're trying to already work like another hour. I was like, just go home, you know?
Definitely.
Be a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think things like being on call, like even I feel like being in the theater somewhere, but you don't necessarily have to be sitting in tech if you're not doing anything in tech, because then you can be doing other stuff that's not just like really quiet stuff you can do in the dark, other stuff, or being able to be within 5 minutes and then just be at a coffee shop nearby feels less like being at work and still accomplishes what you need to accomplish.
For sure. Awesome. So moving on to the next article, it's called 7 Innovative Art Supplies to Add to Your Studio Collection. So this article just showcases different art supplies that aren't very well known that the author finds really good to work with as a designer, or is she a visual artist?
Visual art of some kind.
Yeah. It also very much showcases her Instagram. But there are some really cool things. Most of these I hadn't heard of. I don't know if any are very practical to our part of the theater industry, but I could definitely see scenic designers or like costume designers and people that do kind of work in that model space really having value in using them.
I could see those putty knives that had shape to it potentially being useful for scenic painting.
Yeah.
Like if there's some texture, I don't know what texture that would be, but if there's some texture that you want to achieve that is easily achievable with this weird shaped putty knife. I mean, realistically though, I feel like you would like grab a random piece of glue on and cut the shape you want out of it, and then but if you want to be fancy or like you want to have them on hand, do you think you'd use them or not?
I mean, that was definitely my big takeaway. Was I was like, if you have extra money to spare as an artist and want some fancy tools, great, good information to have.
But these might be good gifts since the holidays are coming up. So if anyone's looking for a gift idea, this might be a good place to start.
Watercolor crayons.
Yeah.
Though I did think the X-Acto knife that kind of like wrapped around your finger was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
I thought that one was really interesting.
I wonder how well it would actually, because it sort of fits into like the whole ergonomic tools world, which I'm a bit more familiar with thinking about than art supplies. And I like looking at it. I feel like it would still kind of hurt your finger. Like, it didn't look that comfy to use. Where was it? There it is. Like, that feels like it's still going to put a lot of pressure on your index finger pushing. Like, I don't think this hook grabbing around right there.
This is our 5th member.
Is really going to, like, help that much? I mean, I'm curious to try it out and see. I'm not curious enough to purchase it. But if I stumbled upon one, I'd give it a go.
Yeah. Definitely interesting.
I don't know. And to think about if you have like some fancy designer using these tools and like, okay, you have the weird like swirly mixing paints here, but how would a scenic artist kind of be able to translate that? It's the same kind of like issue with like if you Photoshop like a wall treatment on and then it's like instead of like doing the layers with like paint or something, then it's a struggle for the scenic artist to be like, okay, well you just kind of pulled up like a texture or an image and now I have to figure out how to relay that sort of information with not Photoshop and like with real
unless you're gonna
materials.
actually like print it.
Yeah, and with the like, okay, well I have this like little square so I can use these fancy like paints on it as compared to like now we have a 10 by 10 wall and how are we gonna achieve that same effect is something to think about.
Yeah, for sure.
I was also surprised that watercolor crayons were in this article. I didn't know that watercolor crayons were an unheard of thing. Like, cause I mean, I haven't seen them before. But like watercolor pencils are a really common established thing. So I'm like, are watercolor crayons new? Did it take them this long to be like, oh, we could put them in crayon form too?
Well, I think it's just that idea of like crayons are for kids, you know, because you don't have that precision of like a pencil, and it's like the line of it isn't that perfect and stuff. But
it kind of looked like some of those pastels that like people
I feel like they're artist crayons, not like crayon.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. They have their value too.
Any
I have
crayon
nothing against
D
crayons.
We're
artist.
gonna give these supplies to like first graders and be like, have fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
What's next? Ah, yes. Bohemian Rhapsody, how a makeup team transformed. Rami, Malek? Okay, into Freddie Mercury. This was very cool. Just kind of the whole prosthetic sort of world and what she had to go through because, you know, Freddie Mercury has such a, like, distinctive, like, face. Everyone knows it, especially the teeth, obviously. And it's just kind of, well, the big thing I really liked that when I read this article was that she asked permission to see like how far she could go with the makeup, because she was like, once I talk to the actor, then we can kind of decide how far to go. And he was like, yeah, I love it, let's go for it. Which, like, that kind of like permission and just like thinking about that is nice to see in the professional world. Not like, we're gonna shove these teeth into your mouth whether you like it or not, you know.
Not toddlers and tiaras, where like it's the prosthetic teeth piece.
And then like the teeth itself, it was cool to see that experimentation of like, first they did it actual size, but those were too big. And so it was kind of playing with that to kind of get it to have that iconic look.
I am honestly both pleased and surprised by the fact that they asked his permission, because I wouldn't. I would imagine like you got cast as Freddie Mercury in this movie. The makeup team is gonna do what they're gonna do to make you look like Freddie Mercury. And if we tell you have to like lose weight or gain weight or do like you do it, like that is your job. Like that's
that normally you're like, and you sign a contract that happens.
Yeah.
And you are fully aware that they have all
that's part
permission
of
to
taking
change
the job.
my appearance.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that. And I'm assuming that was something he signed his contract for, but I think that's just a really good plus on the designer's part to be so collaborative in that way.
Yeah. I am curious what they would have done if he wasn't super about it, because then at that point they're gonna just have to make him look less like Freddie Mercury, and then as the producer gonna get like it's a nice, simple, happy story when they're like, hey, are you good with this? And he's like, oh yeah, totally, let's do it. And then you're like, yeah, go everyone. But I'm wondering how that would have worked out if he was less comfortable with it.
I mean, I think there are ways to emulate without kind of impersonating, and not that this is an impersonation, but they're kind of trying to make him more look like it, which, I mean, it was really interesting to read about all the mustaches and like how they had to like go in between takes and like sometimes change them out and like touch them up after. But yeah, I think it's like, can you get the Freddie Mercury vibe without physically looking at someone who like resembles Freddie Mercury?
Without the fake teeth.
It's really only the fake teeth, right?
Well, I feel like, and from the perspective, I mean, I don't act, but if I were imagining acting, I feel like having fake teeth in would be one of the more invasive makeup things, just because you're trying to talk and there's these other teeth in your mouth.
He also sings in the movie.
I think for him at least, it was kind of this like element though that transported him. He kind of said, he was like, you know, I'm not like a method actor or whatever, but like once I put the teeth in, I really like felt like I was him, because it changes your whole speech, your ability to sing, and like I think like sometimes that would be undesirable, but he was trying to like be someone else with that quality. So I think that kind of, it's sort of the costume piece of like putting on like your like costume and then you really feel in the character. I imagine. I don't know.
No, and that definitely makes a lot of sense.
So.
And for all the changes they did, it only took about 2 hours. Like, I mean, 2
That's
hours is
still
a
a
lot
while.
of time, but
That's
I mean, you hear about the movies where they're there for 6 or 8 hours. And
that's
like,
that's
oh my
crazy,
God.
because then they're there for 6 hours getting makeup on, and then they have to like
And then
go,
they have to
like,
do
it's
their
such a
job,
long day. All right. So our next article is about 3 mistakes that you're making with your LinkedIn profile picture, which basically boiled down to should be good quality. You should be able to see your face. It should not be just your face cropped out of a group photo. It should be a nice, like, professional context.
Never would have guessed that.
I think the only thing that might have relevance to like the theater world is it's like watch your lighting because like you could like I know people have these like cool like tech table kind of shots where like they're getting underlit and like I could see the temptation to use that, but also you like might not realize because like it might be a cool picture but it also might make your face look weird. So like that would be kind of the only thing, like wanting to show you in your element instead of like a headshot, but like I think you have to be aware of kind of how that translates.
Yeah, I mean, I think always the biggest thing with this kind of thing is how do you want to present yourself, and whatever you do, that's your choice, but you have to understand what people will interpret from it, and if that's what you want, great.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this can happen because I think like what you said, like all of these when you say it straight out is pretty obvious. It should be a high quality photo. You should be able to see your face. But obviously, these things ended up in this article because people on LinkedIn have profiles.
Yeah.
And I think
ooh, I bet if you search bad LinkedIn profiles, you'll get some amazing things.
well, because I guess what happens is someone asks them for their LinkedIn. Yeah. And they go, shoot, I don't have a LinkedIn. And so they really quick make a LinkedIn. Yeah. And then they use whatever the best photo of them that they just happen to have on their computer at the time is. Which is how you end up with like, oh, well, here's a really good photo. I'll just crop my face out of it. Or, okay, well, like, it's pretty small, but I'll just blow it up and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then they've made it and they do the thing, and then they're not necessarily going to go, okay, I made that really rushed. I'm going to go back.
It'll be one of those, I'll go back and fix it later.
So I commented on this article when it was first posted, and in my comment, I said, this reminds me that I have to update my LinkedIn profile picture. My profile picture is fine. Like, it's in nice lighting. It looks professional. I just have a better photo now that I want to replace it with. I have not updated it since I commented on that article. I will do it over winter break, probably. Yeah. But, look, I think it comes down to people just don't curate it as frequently and as carefully. It's just a thing that you set up and leave.
I also wonder if this seems more obvious to us because of how theater works as a profession. Like, actors have headshots. That's like a standard thing they come in with, and like there's a lot of design elements. So you expect to see nice quality things, and maybe if we were in a sector that didn't kind of value that creativity as much, maybe these would not be as
just headshots weren't a thing you're used to.
Yeah, maybe these just wouldn't be obvious.
Yeah.
I did nothing about that.
Also, I think people can be vain sometimes, and they might be like, well, this is a better quality photo, but I look better in this photo. And I think, like, it might sound silly, but I really do think people might be like, this is a little blurry, but I look so nice in it, you know? And we'll, like, put it up.
For sure, yeah. Yeah.
Or, like, I could see it, especially if it's some situation where, like, you have, like, a photo of you, like, giving a speech, or at some like the photo of you doing something that looks really professionally good, but it was taken by your friend on their phone, and it's kind of a weird angle and kind of blurring the lines, kind of weird, and like your face maybe isn't super visible, but you're in this context. Like I could see you picking that photo because you're trying to have people see that situation. But maybe they don't even recognize that situation as what it is when it's all said and done. So you kind of just take a step back from it and think of it as not you.
Yeah. So moving on, our next article is about how Green Hippo did this concert motion map experience in Stonehenge. And previously, Stonehenge had kind of prevented companies from coming in and do concerts. They prevented the Rolling Stones because they were worried that it would destroy, obviously, the beauty of Stonehenge. But because they had headphones that people put in their ears to hear the music, and didn't overcrowd it. I think the article says they only have about 50 people. They kind of allowed Green Hippo to do this concert in kind of theater experience, which sounded really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely a really good, like, first event kind of theatrical thing that they did, because it's not something that was obviously gonna ruin the land site or anything that was going to be intrusive, but it definitely let them have a very specific experience to what the location was. And there's been like this weird like uprising of these like silent parties where everyone has their headphones on, so like there is that kind of thing already that they're using there.
I mean, just in terms of the rise of silent parties, I'm super for that because I don't go to parties because I can't.
Yeah.
Like I have, like ear protection like on my keychain in my pocket at all times, which I mostly like. Sometimes it's useful if. Well, sometimes it's useful if, like, I forgot, because I have different ones for the shop that I, like, bring with me. But if I forgot to grab those, I have them on me. It's nice. But mostly I use them for, like, geez, this bus is really loud.
Yeah.
And so, like, if I go to concerts, I always have those on me, because otherwise it's just too loud. And I don't go to parties because it's just too loud, and I can't talk to, because it's hard for me to process anything that's going on when it gets that loud. So I'd be a big fan of going to a concert where I can control my own volume and, like, take it off for a second if I need to and whatnot.
Yeah, I think it's very cool environmental, like, just, like, being in that environment and kind of setting it up. It also helps that this company was giving money back to, like, the people who, like,
definitely
run it, which, like,
I feel like you have to if you're going to use a venue like that.
Well,
yeah, it's not a venue, it's a historical site.
I mean, it becomes a venue the second that you're having it be a place where you're hosting a thing.
Yes, but I think kind of like the historic elements of Stonehenge are kind of more important than having a cool concert there. Like,
I mean, I'm not saying that we should replace Stonehenge with a concert hall.
But be on the first flight out there if they do like the aliens invading Stonehenge or something, you know, like totally feed into like crazy conspiracies of it. I think that'd be cool.
But as I was saying, I think like it was sort of like a right place, right time, right connection sort of deal to get this in the door initially. Yeah. And also what I was really kind of like impressed by was their turnaround time from when it closed as a historical site to when the concert started, because they couldn't really like test any of their projectors or anything, and they only had about half an hour to kind of set all of that up. Yeah. Which is a little wild to be setting that up in Stonehenge. Like, that's impressive.
And it is, I mean, I think it's really cool, the idea of taking a historical space like that and then turning it into this experience. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it can benefit Stonehenge as an institution as well. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it'd be cool if Stonehenge started doing more of these kinds of things, and if other similar places. And you have to be careful, because you can't have like a rager in Stonehenge. No. But if you're doing it respectfully and carefully and in a way that like enhances the space and is respectful of it, I think it's really cool.
I'm a little more skeptical. I mean, I understand why this is so cool. Like, Stonehenge is something we attribute a lot of magic to. We're not really sure how these rocks ended up there in this formation, and that is really cool. But part of me is like, I mean, you can build a replica of Stonehenge. There is one in Virginia. It's called Foamhenge. It's made out of foam. It's really cool. I highly recommend it. I've seen it.
But think about the difference between the article headline, concert in Stonehenge, and concert in Foamhenge. Like, it's different.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm worried that we might take this too far and start to kind of hurt these historical landmarks.
I think it's that big respect thing about what you're doing.
It is a respect thing, but I also think that there is like people who are very respectful of history and like the importance of sites like that. Like, I love history. I also love to party. So kind of like putting those together and like making that kind of a thing and making sure you're bringing in not like these kind of like ragers, but like people who like respect the fact that this is a historical site.
It's kind of like, I know like a lot of museums will do it where you can like buy like one of those like Walkman kind of thing that'll like guide you around, tell you all the history about each painting and whatnot. It's like kind of taking that to like a farther level, which I mean, then you also think like museums a lot of time do have parties and like have like 21 plus nights and stuff.
And some are galas that like they're not they're like legit parties.
Yeah. There's definitely has
that. I'm just very out of... But those are... See, I like neither history nor partying, so I'm real out of this loop.
But those are normally for museums trying to get younger demographics that they feel they would not get to the museum, and it's kind of a money-making expenditure. I didn't see this for foam,
Right.
for Stonehenge. Like,
Foamhead.
I got it in my brain.
We're going on a
having
field
the
trip,
real
everyone.
one.
Let's go to Foamhead.
I'm down. It was a lot of fun. I had a blast. But
Okay.
you have to like walk on this guy's private property.
Wait, like this dude just set it up like in his like yard?
I mean, it's like in kind of like a more.
Maybe
We
I'm
need
so
to read
sorry.
an article on
Showgirls.
Foamhead.
Yeah,
Let's
okay.
talk about
We are way off the rails.
Showgirls.
Let's keep going.
Okay. So the next article is, it's called Showgirls, and it showcases 5 women in the theater industry that are all part of a tour, I believe, and how they are very successful in doing kind of what you typically think of as a man's job. And I think it's great. They like do a great job talking about what each of them does and how they got there. But I mean, it's 5 people in an industry of 1,000, so
Yeah.
it's a great little part of it, but you know.
Yeah, like the first time I was at a load-in for like a touring concert, like one of the first things I noticed was like there are no women. Like they were like 3. Like I remember like trying to find all of the women there just because it was bugging me that there were. And at one point I was like, oh, okay, there's another person. Oh no, she just took her jacket off. That was this like same person, just she came in and back out, just wearing a different shirt now. And I feel like that's kind of like, I think it's good to showcase, hey, there are women in this industry
That are very successful.
because when you walk in the
and
room,
doing
it
well.
doesn't feel like it.
Yeah.
I also wonder who this article is like targeted at, because they talk about how one of the reasons they think there aren't a lot of women in the industry is because they don't realize it exists as an industry. Like they're not aware of this kind of tech AV world. So I wonder who the article is like trying to get. Is it like targeted towards younger women who are like looking kind of for a career that you might not need? Because one of the things it highlights is that you don't necessarily need a college degree to kind of jump into this industry. Is it targeted at them? Is it targeted at other women who are similar to them so they don't feel so alone? I was just kind of curious about that.
I think it serves a bunch of different purposes, kind of an awareness of this industry that is out there, and also if you're trying to get into an industry like this, being like, no, there are other people, and kind of like this is what they're like, and like, I mean, all of them kind of went through, like, they were all like so tough, and I think when you're in an industry where you can be the only woman in the room, like you kind of have to be tough. Like, you don't have to be outwardly like, I don't know, I guess there's like some associations with tough, but like you don't have to be like loud and boisterous to be like tough. But like you do have to like deal with a lot of like shit just from like working with all like men, especially I think some of the older like generations of men aren't really, I think we're getting better, but they're not used to this idea, so they will probably like harass you a little bit more about being the only woman in the room.
Yeah, I mean, this summer I was with USITT, the like circ program that they did, and we got to tour a lot of different venues, and me and a friend that I made there who was a black man, we kind of had this contest going of every venue that we walked through, because there would be a lot of people working there. Like, he would count all the non-white people and I would count all the women, and we could see like who could get a better score at each venue. And it was like our like funny way of like laughing about it and stuff. But it also just was kind of like a lot of the time the number was like 2 or 3, and we're like, oh, they're their token few. And I feel like in some ways, and not that I don't want to say it's a bad thing, because at least there are some, but like in some ways that's kind of what this article feels like. It's like, there's their token few, like, you know, women doing their thing. But like, yeah, that's what it is. It's a few right now, so trying to showcase what a good career it is definitely a good thing, and I hope that these women do kind of set the plane for more to get involved.
And going back to your question from earlier, I got a vibe that the target audience is girls and young women who are kind of like into high school or maybe very early in college-ish, who like this kind of stuff and found this article because they're interested in the field or interested in like, and don't realize that this could be an option for them, and then seeing like, oh, well, then that's kind of weird because like their first exposure to it is, hey, it's a really male-dominated industry, but there's 5 women in it. You want to be number 6, so that's kind of sad. But
I can't wait for this like not to be an article.
Yeah.
Like that's what a lot of like the
Yeah,
articles I was like,
is.
this
Yeah.
is great, but I can't wait for this to not be news.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
like
just-
I don't want to be news that I'm a woman on this thing. Like,
yeah.
yeah,
what? But I mean, looking at practically, that is what it is right now, and I think this is a good step to make it more.
Yeah, and to publicize it. Like, I get all of that,
Yeah.
but, like, a part of me is like, I can't wait until this isn't a big
Ooh,
deal.
we need to check the green page in like 30 years. See
Yeah.
how it's changed.
my hope is that my hope is because it can turn around really fast.
Mm-hmm.
All you need is one generation of people to have a bunch of women that want to go into the field, and then you like that. I mean, the problem, of course, is that it's really discouraging right now because of sexism embedded in the industry. But I feel like it like maybe it will take 30 years, but I don't think it necessarily has to. I don't know.
30
maybe
years
I'm just
sounds
being-
fast to me, and like timelines of history.
I mean, I know
Like-
it is fast, but like
Movements take a while.
I guess I'm hoping that we're already 20 years in, if that makes sense,
Okay,
in a
makes
way.
sense.
Like I'm hoping that we've already started getting there, but I don't know if we have or not.
We'll see.
I mean, yeah, we'll see. I feel like we'll see.
In 10 years.
Yeah, in 10 years.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right.
Here's our timeline. Great.
Oh. The next article is Hamlet is the latest Chicago Shakespeare theater role that didn't go to a local. The article kind of discusses how they've been, for like a local Chicago company, they've just been bringing in outside talents to fill their major role, and basically the author feels like the people they're bringing in, though sometimes it's kind of those big names to like draw people in, that's not always the case, and the author feels like the talent that they're bringing in when it's not these big name draws isn't greater than anything they can find in Chicago, so they don't understand why they're not casting Chicago actors in these leading roles.
I mean, it does seem weird, just in the sense that if they're not better than someone you can cast locally, then why would you want to pay for travel and housing and all those other, like, just purely from a logistical standpoint, it is weird.
Yeah, and especially Chicago theater scene being so, like, people like to follow actors in, like, different roles, that, like, it seems like bringing people in would kind of, like, be counterintuitive to this, like, close-knit theater culture they have.
That was something I thought was really interesting about the article, is it kind of refers to Chicago as like a resident theater company where like people go to the shows to expect these people, and they go because they know it's the local actor. And I thought that was really interesting. It's something that I probably would not have expected from, because Chicago is a pretty big city and a pretty big theater city, so it's not something I would have expected. But the article does also say that they are looking for people in Chicago, and they are not finding the talent because they're moving to New York if they kind of want to make it big.
Well, yeah, it's kind of this weird, like, I can't get any good roles in Chicago, so I moved to New York, and then they're bringing people from New York, and I don't know, it seems like it's kind of hard for, like, younger Chicago actors to, like, get these more leading roles, and I think it's kind of some association with, like, New York's the place to go if you want to make it. And I think this is just kind of feeding into it. I also thought, like, the producer's, like, response to it was kind of, like, a long-winded, just, like, diversion away from the question when they were like, well, we love Chicago. And I was like, that's not answering why you don't cast Chicago actors.
But I did think that they were making some good ways to feed kind of the Chicago area actors, not like they're creating like classes and like whatnot. So they are kind of hoping to put like a good foot forward of like developing more actors that can do these roles. But I think like this is a very common thing outside of Chicago too. Like I feel like it's not too crazy. Like it's not a Chicago specific thing that happened.
But I think the difference might be that Chicago sort of has this reputation for being a theater city.
For sure, yeah.
And so I think I could see people having this idea that like you could, as an actor, move to Chicago and like be like a successful actor doing like a ton of stuff just being in Chicago, whereas not all cities necessarily have that reputation, which I think is why it's more notable that it's in Chicago as opposed to somewhere else. All right, our last article is about an increase in LGBTQ characters on TV, and that has reached a record high at 8.8%. So
it's moving forward.
Yeah.
That's definitely good. There's some numbers that, were definitely a little sad in how little it moved forward, but it's at least going in the right direction. They've done the GLAAD, is that the place that does that survey and like kind of breaking everything down. That was something that when I took Megan's special topics class, which was playwrights of color, contemporary American playwrights of color, and we kind of looked at these different like diversity things, and we kind of really broke it down about how they like find all this stuff and how they like create these numbers. So I was glad to see. I was glad because I do really think that they did a good job of finding these statistics. So I definitely think that this was a good way to showcase it.
And they also break it down by like who's a series regular,
Right.
who's a recurring.
Yeah.
That was kind of interesting to see too.
Yeah.
I'm happy you kind of mentioned that you had more of like an idea of where the numbers came from, because
Yeah.
I would have loved to see more of like
For sure.
where it comes from, because I don't know like
Yeah.
where they're pulling these numbers or
Right.
how these like characters are really being like represented, because if they're
Yeah.
being represented as like a token best
Yeah.
friend,
Yeah.
then like that's
Right.
less
Mhm.
significant than like a like substantial full character.
Yeah.
So
I think something that is very interesting to look at, because this is specifically TV, is that there's this huge wave of like just internet TV where you have like your Netflix shows, your Amazon and Hulu shows.
I feel like
that-
Netflix shows must be being
Yeah,
counted.
yeah,
They
no,
talk
it
about
all
it.
is, it
Yeah.
all is. But I think that it's like it's not all these different people fighting for one space to output their shows, that they can just make it and they don't have to like fight with other people, so
For
they can.
content.
I think it's a lot easier to develop these stories and characters and get an audience generated quickly for it.
I think that's fair, because you don't have to worry about being in the prime time slot.
Right. Yeah.
Like every slot is the prime time slot. People just watch it when they want to watch it.
Yeah.
But that being said, like, if it's just Netflix shows, that's something you have to click on. It's something you have to actively choose to watch. And there is something to be said where if it was just on the TV, I mean, I don't have cable. I pretty much only stream. So,
Same.
but someone might just turn the TV on and watch it, and that could be exposure for them that they may have not gotten if it was something they had to click on Netflix.
I mean, Orange is the New Black. Like not
That's true.
every Netflix show is huge, but
There's been a
enough
lot.
really, really successful
Yeah.
Netflix originals that I'm not worried about Netflix shows not being able to generate as big of a pull as standard broadcast TV. I think that both of them can generate really big audiences for shows.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also good that, in a way, I think it's good that like these kind of companies are leading the movement, because then broadcast TV is like, oh, if we need to get our numbers up, then we have to start doing that too. And they're kind of forced by this almost peer pressure way to do it. And it's a good thing that they should really, think about their characters and what kind of people they're portraying. So
I hope that if they do like fall into like the peer pressure, they're like still doing it right though, not like let's throw some diversity up on that screen
Right.
to keep
Yeah.
up. Like let's like actually look at our content and these characters and what we can do to better serve audiences.
Yeah, and I think that in general, like, our generation and stuff is like educated in that way, that we can see through that stuff for most of it, so Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Kat says bye.